close that is, and how seemingly all four teams, last year the Redskins weren't exactly part of that mix, but the Washington Redskins are a team that perhaps you can reckon with down the stretch. As all these four teams, you don't have too much on them. You can't see, I don't really see any one of them pulling away from the pack. Perhaps the winner of the NFC East, has 10, perhaps 11 wins. I don't see them breaking out of the door. So for the Washington Redskins, it's a key for late in the year trying to make that playoff push. And I feel like Kirk Cousins should be the guy that is taking the snaps next week. But we don't know how much more Robert Griffin needs before he's healthy to go. Now, this is a re-aggravated concussion, as he suffered it the week before as well. Washington certainly with a decision on its hands. Next, coming up on the NFL goal line, we are at halftime over in the game on Monday Night Football. We'll give you more insight on that after this commercial break, along with what to make of the San Francisco 49ers. Certainly a dominant win in week number 5. We'll take a look inside the city by the bay in San Francisco, and also coming up after the commercial break, a trip over to Kansas City after a last-second loss. What to make of the Chiefs and the booing of Matt Castle as he's taken off the field and the crowd goes nuts for the backup. Certainly the decision to make over in Kansas City. We'll be back after a quick 30 on the NFL goal line. This is Nick Rice along with Phil Nunziata. Welcome back to the NFL goal line. Nick Rice along with Phil Nunziata on an action-packed Week 5 of football. We only have one team that is undefeated at this point and one team that is 0-5 on the year. But certainly a team that is in the mix for being one of the bottom of the league as far as talent. And perhaps later in the year in the win column is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, some news after the game with some post-game press conferences of the fact that Matt Castle was cheered off the field. Now, you don't see that very often, but in a team in flux, and in rebuilding mode for a team that hasn't gone to the playoffs in over 10 years, the Kansas City Chiefs, their fans are getting frustrated. It's been an up and down and most certainly down ride for the Kansas City Chiefs, and they have hit rock bottom right now at this point, partner. They're one of the worst teams in the National Football League, and right now, what to make of Matt Castle being cheered off the field? Now, you never like to see a guy getting injured and most certainly cheered off the field. You don't really see that very often in the NFL, and certainly in the post-game press conferences, there was a little more, extracurriculars that really, the Chiefs are just, right now, things are falling apart over there in Kansas City. Isn't that right, Phil?
Yeah, it's definitely an odd situation. It's been known for a while that the Kansas City Chiefs fans are ready for a change. They don't think Matt Castle is their guy, and that might be a little short-sighted of them because they do have some great running backs in Jamal Charles and even Peyton Hillis as a backup over there. And this is a team, not a lot of playoff success, but a few years ago, winning the division and getting to the first round of the playoffs, losing to Baltimore, which is coincidentally who they played this past week. Which led to the situation at hand where Matt Castle not having a very good day, 9 of 15 for 92 yards, no touchdowns, one lost fumble, and just not playing very well in a very winnable game as the Ravens only scored 9 points and beat the Chiefs 9-6. And as Matt Castle's being pulled off the field due to an injury, you hear the Chiefs fans start to cheer. And it's really kind of a disrespectful moment. I mean, there's situations where if it's an opposing player and they cheer, it's still not a very good sportsmanship thing to do, but you kind of understand it a little bit more. It's notorious that when Michael Irvin got hurt in Philadelphia that the crowd went wild. That's in no way a positive move by the Eagles fans' part, but it's more understood. And, there's really not a situation when one of your own in your own jersey to go down, because it's one thing of a situation where, let's say if Michael Vick goes down, there's a lot of Eagles fans that think Nick Foles is going to be the guy of the future. I hope Kansas City fans realize that, if he goes down, you have Brady Quinn as your backup. And last time I checked, he's not going to do much better. So it's really just an odd situation a lot of Chiefs players that interviewed after the game, as you said, took took a lot of offense to it, as that's their guy who's rallied the troops. He's definitely well liked in that locker room. As I said, leading them to the playoffs a few years back, and it's just a situation that you don't like to see. And especially Chiefs fans, typically more educated and more of the classier fans of the NFL. It was definitely a shock to me, that's for sure.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Phil, Kansas City is a working class city, and over there in Kansas, the Kansas City Chiefs certainly have one of those decisions on their hands. And right now, it's reported that Matt Castle unlikely to play against the Chiefs. And another thing for Matt Castle over there in Kansas City is not all the blame certainly can be placed on him. There's a lot of other areas that the Chiefs have struggled, and they are the bottom in the league in turnover differential, and right now they're allowing more sacks on average than any other team right now in the NFL. Certainly, things are more than just at the quarterback situation. There's more, dilemmas to go along. Also for the Kansas City Chiefs, they're ranked towards the bottom in defense as well. In a 9-6 game, obviously very winnable. But right now for the Kansas City Chiefs, with Matt Castle being questionable at quarterback and Brady Quinn not a lot better, right now for Kansas City, this year has turned into a mess over there in the big state of Kansas. And, for Matt Castle, I don't see him as being the guy of the future. He's in his 8th year. This should be his prime year to make a run for his money, in other words. And he has that big contract. What is he waiting for, over in Kansas City? And in a very winnable game, you go down with an injury. You certainly don't like, to be cheered off the field in a sense. But, you're not getting Brady Quinn. You're not getting a solid quarterback no matter Brady Quinn or Matt Castle takes the snap. But so for Kansas City, I mean, this year, in a sense, is already done, already ruined. But, right now for Kansas City, Romeo Cannell has a very tough job on his hands trying to deal with, a very frustrated crowd after so many years not making the playoffs. And then now he doesn't even have a starting quarterback in a sense. And, with Matt Castle already throwing 9 picks, this might be his final year in that city. And maybe the Chiefs have a top 5 pick. They might want to go for a quarterback, certainly not a stretch after a 1-4 start.
Yeah, that's definitely a situation where I could see, especially I wouldn't even blame Matt Castle if, when he gets healthy and he thinks he's back to, here's a guy, as I said, led the team to the playoffs 2 years ago. And let's not forget his days with the Patriots, leading them to a 10-6 record after, of course, Tom Brady went down playing the Chiefs. Go figure. But it's a situation where I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Castle, he gets healthy. He's like, what, I don't need this. Goes into coach's office and said, hey, listen, trade me. I don't need to be here anymore if these fans aren't going to appreciate it. And I'm sure the Chiefs would oblige because what do? As you said, they're going to have a high draft pick. Maybe they go after Matt Barkley or, someone else, Geno Smith even, a quarterback that's going to be good coming out of this draft because the teams with, the Colts and the Redskins getting quarterbacks, there's not as many teams going after quarterbacks, so it might be easier to obtain those kind of guys in this draft. So I wouldn't be surprised if, as I said, when Matt Castle gets healthy, he's like, I don't need this anymore. Trade me.
Absolutely. And for Kansas City, Castle has an under 70 quarterback rating. It kind of shows the kind of performance he's had with 5 TDs and 9 interceptions on this year. And right now, the blame on the quarterback, in a sense, is correct. And, the Chiefs don't have that quarterback. He's a below-average quarterback, I would say. It's not a stretch to have Castle among one of the worst in the league now. In a way that's a stretch. There's a lot of other quarterbacks, teams that would like to have Castle under center, and certainly there's more blame around than just at the QB position. But, for the Kansas City Chiefs, right now you don't have a quarterback. In a way, it's not a stretch that they go for a top 5 pick. You don't go for a quarterback in next year's draft. But, a kind of a team that as well, in San Francisco, maybe with Alex Smith in a way, I don't know if I see this, but perhaps with, a more stable offensive system. Now, you're not going to get any support from the fans, but, as we saw in this game, but, maybe, Castle has one of those turnaround kind of years where if he stays with the same system, he's been thrown around the league, in the past few years. He's, stuck with Kansas City for the past couple, but if he's with the same quarterback kind of scheme, he's with the same offense for a few years, maybe you might see a resurgence in his career, but certainly in his 8th year, he's running out of time.
Yeah, you talk about a stable offensive system, similar to what he had in New England, a team he had been around for a few years, got to learn from Tom Brady, knew the system, and when he was thrown in there, he played rather well. They went 10-6, just missed the playoffs, but they were playing good football. Had they got in that year, who knows what they would have done? We might have had another Tom Brady situation on our hands where a no-name quarterback leads them to the promised land. You don't know for sure because he had a very stable year in that year, so it really comes down to, this NFL league has always been, what have you done for me lately? And I don't know that the Chiefs, unless, they go after Matt Barkley or a Geno Smith, I don't see why they wouldn't stick with the guy they have. But if they're going to be impatient and think that they have much better options, I could definitely see after this year Matt Castle playing for another team, or they draft a quarterback and he ends up riding the bench. Regardless, it does not look like a promising future if it involves Kansas City and Matt Castle in the same sentence.
Absolutely. And, the only way that would, certainly work well for both parties is if, Castle gets cut by the Chiefs. Now, we'll have to wait and see how this year goes. And certainly if he plays like he did, in the first 4 or 5 games, maybe Castle's out the door before the season's over. Now, it's very high expectations. Or, at least in the backup position, take Brady Quinn and finish the year off strong in a sense. Because that division, certainly, if the Chiefs don't make hay now, it's either Denver or San Diego winning that division, in a landslide by a sense against, the Kansas City Chiefs. So they need quarterback. They need a quarterback right now. And maybe they might go to free agency in a sense, if they don't believe in Brady Quinn at the moment. I'm very hard-pressed, Phil, to believe that Brady Quinn or Matt Castle will be the answer for getting the Chiefs at least to 500 this year. That's very lofty expectations for a very under-talented squad.
Yeah, this definitely, aside from Jamal Charles and, as far as offense goes anyway, you got Jamal Charles and you have Dwayne Bowe, so they have a little bit of stability there. But aside from that, you got a lot of guys that, you could definitely upgrade with very easily. This seems like a team that's destined for a top 5 pick in this year's draft. And, maybe you go for a free agent guy, but at this point, you'd almost be playing for that high draft pick. So, and not that there's any huge names out there as far as, quarterbacks go. Donovan McNabb seems like he'd be the biggest name I could think of in free agency. And if he's even still in shape to play football, only he would know at this point. So really, it's a situation. The Chiefs don't have a lot of promise this year. In a week or two, if, as you said, Matt Castle's probably not going to play. So after a few weeks of Brady Quinn, when they realize that they have 2 quarterbacks they can't get it done, I'm sure they'll kind of shut down and just start playing for next year, see if they can get any positives out of the remaining games they have.
Absolutely. And that defense is a little better than I gave them credit for, but obviously Kansas City has their work cut out for them. Their offensive line towards the bottom of the league, outside of that Baldwin and Bowe duo, certainly, and Jamal Charles as well in the backfield, the Chiefs have very little to look high of in the coming years. But in a way, that's not the sense in very many ways. The San Francisco 49ers, in 2 weeks, only allowing 3 points, and certainly after a 45-3 win over the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are better than that game, but not by a lot, because San Francisco at home, showing its home crowd how to get things done on the offensive side of the ball, and defensively, perhaps one of the most all-around units in all of football. San Francisco is a team to reckon with. They're not undefeated right now. They lost to the Vikings. But outside of that game, ever since that loss, the Niners have been on a roll, and they've gotten things done through the air, on the ground, and on defense. And even special teams has gotten their way into, San Francisco making plays and whatnot. Right now for San Francisco, looking very hot. Not a lot of teams are going to go into their stadium and beat them down. Right now for San Francisco, things are looking very hot over in the Bay Area.
Yeah, it's a situation, you see this game and they accomplish something, that Joe Montana never did, that Steve Young has never done, which is compile 600-plus yards of total offense in a game, 300 yards passing, 300 yards rushing. A situation, as you said, coming off that shocking loss against the Vikings. What have they done since? 45-3 against the Bills, and, of course, last week, the 35-0 shellacking of the New York Jets. So they've obviously responded well to the criticism. Here's a team that can beat you in so many ways. Alex Smith, as I said, 18 of 24, for 303 yards, 3 touchdowns. They have a nice little. I'm a big fan of the way they're using Colin Kaepernick, their backup quarterback, who's definitely much more mobile than Alex Smith. They kind of have their little form of wildcat